This is Talkback 721-1290 or 1-800-568-5309.
This is Newstalk KGVO, AM 1290 and 98.3 FM. KGVO, Missoula's news and weather station.
Hey, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It is finally here. It is Election Day at long last. Talkback this morning is brought to you by Phillips Janitorial, where they offer both residential and commercial cleaning, your home and your business. No job too big or small for Phillips. Their number 406-260-6617. Harrington Surgical Supply, where you can feel confident in their discreet and knowledgeable guidance on a multitude of products and medical supplies. That's Harrington Surgical Supply. Also brought to you by 123 Seamless Gutters, the family-owned and operated business that serves all of western Montana. They'll take care of your gutters so you don't have to. 406-240-2669, protecting the foundation of your future. And by Y West Storage, out at the Y on Two Smokes Way. Need a storage unit? These are the folks to call at 406-510-0590. At Y West Storage, they're making room for you.
The views and opinions expressed on Talkback are not those of the staff, management, or advertisers.
Well, it's finally here. It's Election Day. Good morning, Mr. Nick.
Good morning.
All right, the polls are open, ladies and gentlemen. And I have here in my hand all the information anyone would ever need to vote today. First of all, the polls opened about an hour and 5 minutes ago. And they will close at 8 o'clock tonight. And, of course, I'll be there at 8 o'clock tonight to get the initial numbers from Bradley Seaman, the elections administrator for Missoula County, and try to get the first results out for you on our website and, of course, on the air tomorrow morning. Now, by the way, in case you are new to Missoula and you didn't have a chance to register to vote, you can still register to vote today. Absolutely, even though it's Election Day. Here's how that works. Election Day registration is available, but be advised there may be long wait times because I guess a lot of people wait till the last minute. So just stop on by the Election Center over at 140 North Russell, and plenty of parking will be available, and they have staff ready to help you. Now you got to bring some identification, all the things you'll need to prove that you are a U.S. citizen, and, of course, you live in Montana. And that way you can register to vote in today's election. So there you go. Just some of the important things to know. Now, we have open phones, right?
Mm-hmm. Until 8:30.
Till 8:30, and then we have global hotspots. So if there's something you want to talk about, the fact that you waited till the last minute to get to the polls, or you submitted yours. I know I did. I mailed my ballot the day after I got it, and so there are all sorts of different ways to vote. But at least they all get there, and they'll all be counted, and we will finally be done.
Does anyone out there have any predictions or anything like that? Also, just know that global hotspots will be slightly different because we will be obviously talking about Election Day and past elections and the importance of elections. So we are going to try to focus on that. But yeah, we want your calls this morning.
You bet. 721-1290 is our number, 1-800-568-5309. It is Election Day. We'd like to know how you're feeling about this election, because it has been particularly hard fought between, especially the national election, between former President Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris, who, the last time I checked, were running pretty much neck and neck. Some polls have Trump slightly ahead. Some polls have Harris slightly ahead. So we're going to just have to wait and see.
And I don't know that we will know or have an answer by this evening. I would hope so. That'd be great to just have this all done. But yeah, some of those swing states I think are going to take a couple days maybe. So we'll definitely see how tonight goes.
And those slackers in Alaska and Hawaii always come in last.
Luckily, those aren't big swing states.
I know. I like to poke fun at my birthplace, as I was born in Hawaii. Anyway, let's get Emmett on the line. Tell you what, we're up against our first break, so I want to give Emmett plenty of opportunity to make his comment. Phone lines are open if you want to talk about Election Day for the next half hour or so, whatever. Well, what do you think the results will be? Do you think it'll be Trump, Harris, Gianforte, Bussey, Zinke, Tranel? Who do you think? Give us a call, 721-1290, 1-800-568-5309. We'll see if you're right by the end of the day.
Dennis Bragg with your latest weather, a 50% chance of snow through Tuesday morning, and then mostly cloudy and cold with a high near 38 degrees, gusty winds as high as 30 miles per hour at times. Not expecting much snow in the valleys, perhaps half an inch early on, but then several inches of snow at elevations above 4,000 feet, so that means some winter driving over the passes and in the higher valleys. Our coldest night yet Tuesday with lows in the low to mid-teens by Wednesday morning. That means some patchy fog, but then sunshine returns Wednesday and Thursday.
Hey, happy Election Day, everybody. Good to have you along this morning. It all comes to a point today, and hopefully we'll know something at least by midnight or into tomorrow or by the end of the week. Who knows? But Emmett is waiting on the line for us. Emmett, good morning, sir. You are up awfully early on Election Day.
Well, yeah, I did vote early, as you know, about last week, when just before I got my cold. Yeah, and I definitely did that, but I slept pretty okay, but kind of fitfully. I am nervous about the election. I just pray about it. I just say, Lord, I trust in your providence. I leave it in your hands, but I'm nervous. And I am scared, what if Kamala gets in? She just might. The way it is so close. Do you like the inflation you have? You're going to get a lot more of it under Kamala. Do you like the broken borders? You're going to get a lot more of it under Kamala. And, she was the one that did say to that one person running to be confirmed to the Supreme Court justice, the dogma lives loudly within you, because he's a Catholic. So she's no friend to Catholics. I don't know if she's going to restrict free speech or whatever, or what's going to happen. And I like the idea of price controls and everything, but that can often backfire. So we could just see sky high food prices and everything. We just got to pray. I hope you guys have been praying through the election. And I guess we just have to leave it in the hands of the Lord,
Well, there is one thing you can be guaranteed of if Ms. Harris is elected president, and that is, as she said at the outset of her campaign, joy. You'll have joy if she wins.
I don't think high prices will give me joy. That's hilarious. I guess that really is supposed to give us joy. High food, boy. I don't know what she's thinking. I wish. All I could say is, though, I was going to say something really important, and I renewed my membership in the NRA for the next couple of years.
Good job.
I think it's a good idea. She's not going to be happy about her Second Amendment rights. It's just I don't think I've ever felt this disturbed since Hillary Clinton was running against Trump, and for some reason I think it's feel even worse. I don't know why, but
you remember how close that election was, right? I mean, it was razor thin. So we could have a repeat of that.
You don't think we'd even have something like voting of 269 to 269, and the Supreme Court or the Congress has to decide our president, who is the president, do we?
We'll just have to wait and see. Emmett, listen, thanks for the call, buddy. It's always good to hear from you. And Jeff is up next. Jeff, good morning, sir. You're on Talkback. It's Election Day, sir. What's on your mind?
Hey, good morning. Happy Election Day to everybody out there in Montana. I voted early. I hope everybody votes early and often.
I love it.
Yep. Two things. First of all, Babylon Bee, its central headline was, Democrats warn that if Trump is elected, it will be the end of bureaucracy as we know it.
Okay.
So, something a little more serious. I don't know. Have you followed the saga of Peanut the Squirrel?
No, I have not. I have not followed the saga of Peanut the Squirrel. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yeah.
I was just going to say I saw it. That was a crazy story.
Right.
Yeah.
What happened?
Go ahead, Jeff. Yeah.
Okay, there's a guy in New York who adopted a squirrel, Peanut, and he's been a social media celebrity for 7 years.
Wow.
An animal rescue nonprofit was built around him, saving hundreds of animals, from horses to rodents. And so he was a pet. He was in the house. He was calm. He was, the perfect pet. Well, New York City decided that he was a health menace. And so they confiscated Peanut the squirrel and his other animal was a raccoon. And let's see, what was the name? Oh, Fred the raccoon. And New York City euthanized both of them to check them ostensibly for rabies. Now, squirrels don't get rabies. It's a little-known fact. But just the thought of a city government going into a house, taking a pet because they didn't want the person to have the pet, a pet that's completely harmless, and then euthanizing it, killing it, because they didn't like it. I mean, I think that's what today's election is about. I was thinking about it earlier today, and it's, there are things about Donald Trump that I don't like. But in my mind, the two things that are paramount for me is life and liberty. And that's personal liberty, economic liberty, and this story of Peanut the Squirrel just really kind of epitomizes what's on the line here, life and liberty. Now, folks will go, it was a squirrel, for crying out loud, get over it. But I think it illustrates just a broader point that there's no bureaucracy that's too insensitive to do something that's really stupid.
Whatever happened to live and let live, Seriously.
I don't know, Peter. I don't know. It was when I came across this, it's like, really? But I encourage everybody, go out there and research a little bit about Peanut the Squirrel and why he matters. It's a really sad story.
I hear you, man. Well, thanks for telling us. I appreciate it. I wish I should have paid closer attention. But thanks for the call. Appreciate it.
You bet.
All right. And I believe Elena is up next. Elena, good morning. You're on Talkback. Happy Election Day, ma'am. Go ahead.
Well, we won't know if it's happy or not until tomorrow or next week.
All right.
We get the results. That was Jeff, I believe, and Peter, you won't have a problem finding it. It's making national news big time about peanuts.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now on USA Today. Yes, ma'am.
And this is an example of something I brought up before. They're federal regulatory agencies, state, and local. And this is what happens. Now, as far as my vote, I'm walking it down. Well, not walking it, but I'm going to vote in person today. I sent you an email about a week ago, I think, about the bills that are being drafted during the interim committees, and they started in August. And as of yesterday, there are 826 bills. And these bills usually come from NGOs, regulatory agents. It's a good idea, and maybe you should think about it, Mr. Legislators. Most of them are revisions of codes we already have. And when they're not done with this, 826, and their drafts, you can see the title. If you go into the Montana Legislative website, you can see the title and what legislator is presenting them. So on that note, I hope everybody made a very informed decision.
Elena, it's always a pleasure talking with you. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're going to come right back. We have Harry, Dave, and Mr. Wingnut. It's open phones for another, 10 minutes or so, and then we will have Global Hotspots, and we'll be primarily talking about the election, and as we go forward, we'll talk about all those things. Of course, your phone calls, most welcome. We'll be right back after this. I don't know about you, Nick, but I'm shedding a few tears. We're not going to be hearing these campaign ads anymore after today. I don't know what to do. Anyway, let's get to the phones. Let's get Harry on the line. Harry, good morning. Please give me a Kleenex. Go ahead. What's on your mind, sir?
Good morning. Yeah, it's breaking my heart too. But,
what's up?
I don't know how you missed the story about Peanut. I mean, it's all over the outrage sphere that all the radio talk shows are talking about it. I don't know. They grabbed a hold of it, and boy, they just beaten that to death.
Well, you know what I do, Harry? I read. I don't keep track of that. But please go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's a terrible thing, but it's at least it wasn't the Haitians that ate them. But I got one thing. a couple callers earlier this week were lamenting about Monica, running for so many offices and stuff. Well, I got one question for them. What offices have they run for?
True enough.
I mean,
yeah.
You put other people down, but at least she's getting out there and trying.
Put it this way: she at the very least, she put her money quite literally where her mouth is. Traveling all over this side of the state, putting thousands of miles on her car, talking to groups. She a very effective campaigner.
Exactly, yeah. So, I mean, at least she's giving it a try. And I do have one prediction. I believe Troy Downing will win over the non-candidate who's running against him. I don't know. You would think for a national seat, a person would know who his opponent is, but I think his opponent swore he was going to spend like more than $12 or something on it. So, I mean, do you know who Troy Downing's running against? I don't know.
I do not know. That's in the eastern part of the state, and so he'll be representing that district, and it'll be Zinke or Trinnell representing this district.
Yeah, we didn't even get to vote.
I just think it's a shame that you should at least be able to know who the guy is. But I mean, the show said he's a non-candidate, as far as I'm concerned. But anyway, that's my prediction. But where is our predictor who never gets anything wrong? I want to hear what his says.
He hasn't called in yet, but
that's too bad.
But we do. Global Hotspots is going to be covering that sort of thing. So anyway, thanks for the call, sir. We appreciate it. Let's get Dave on. Dave, good morning. Dave, you are on Talkback. Hi, go ahead.
Yeah, good morning. Donald Trump has said he's going to be dictator for a day. Well, that doesn't fly. You're either a dictator or you're not. But he has the most to lose this time around. Both win and lose. If he goes to the White House or he goes to the big house. So I mean,
okay, go ahead. I'm sorry. That's pretty good.
Yes, and it's quite possibly true. But if he was to lose, I'm about 80 to 90% sure that he will not. First of all, will refuse to admit he lost, of course, again. And secondly, it wouldn't surprise me if he calls for a 1 million man march on Washington. I mean, he has a lot to lose, and it wouldn't surprise me if he did all that.
Well, I'll tell you what, Dave, Donald Trump certainly has taken up rent-free residence in your head.
Well, thank you.
It's okay. Obviously, you care very deeply about the campaign, and so you call, and we appreciate it.
Well, I'm a student of history, and I've studied, Germany, Italy, and ancient Rome, and I have some, pretty good ideas of why people turn down representative forms of government and accept dictators, and I think it's quite possible this could play out again. If the economy is good. If everything, the economy is good, people will say, yes, we want to keep that person in there longer than he's supposed to stay in, and we'll make him dictator for life.
According to the Constitution, he's already served one term. He's only allowed 2, and so 4 years is all he'll have.
Right, and that's what they thought about Mussolini and Hitler and a few other people. So,
come on, man, come on!
I'm telling you what history is.
I know, but you're taking it to the most ridiculous extreme possible.
For 500 years,
for heaven's
Rome was ruled by the Senate, which was a sort of a representative form of government, and then the economy went bad. There was crime in Rome. And the people turned to a dictator to save the country. And so those things, history repeats itself. And it can repeat itself again.
Well, we'll just have to wait and see. Dave, thank you for the call. We appreciate it. Let's get Brad on. We got just a minute or two before we have to take a quick break and get into Global Hotspots. Brad, thank you for holding. Go ahead, please.
You bet, Peter. Real quick, all I want to do is remind those who are going to be voting today to remember to set your clocks back to 3% interest rates and $1.80 per gallon gasoline.
All right. All right. Thanks for the call. Very, very, very well done. Tongue in cheek. Perfect. All right. We're going to take a quick break and come right back because we'll have Dr. Mirdad Kia on the phone. We have Dr. Michael Mayer here in the studio. It'll be global hotspots, kind of domestic, if you will. So we're going to come right back with more of Talkback and hopefully your phone calls to join in right after this.
Dennis Bragg with your latest weather, a 50% chance of snow through Tuesday morning, and then mostly cloudy and cold with a high near 38 degrees, gusty winds as high as 30 miles per hour at times. Not expecting much snow in the valleys, perhaps half an inch early on, but then several inches of snow at elevations above 4,000 feet, so that means some winter driving over the passes and in the higher valleys. Our coldest night yet Tuesday with lows in the low to mid-teens by Wednesday morning. That means some patchy fog, but then sunshine returns Wednesday and Thursday.
Okay, we are back. This is Talkback. 721-1290 is our number. A special edition, if you will, of global, or should we say domestic hotspots. Dr. Michael Mayer joining us here in the studio this morning, Professor Emeritus at the University of Montana. And joining us on the phone, Dr. Mirdad Kia, Professor of History at UM. Gentlemen, good morning and welcome. So let's kick it off. Who wants to start?
Go ahead, Mirdad.
Mirdad, please.
Good morning to you, Peter and Nick. Thank you very much for having us once again on this wonderful show. On this amazing day, I hope that all of our listeners have either voted or about to vote. This is a great day for the American political system, for the American democracy, something so many parts of the world lack or dream of, the right to vote and choose our future leaders. And I hope that everyone participates in it. We are going to talk today, based on our conversation, about the implications, the impact of this election on the world and how the world would react from different perspectives, depending on the outcome. How would the world respond to the results of the election? At least our guesstimates, and which candidate, which country prefers to see, and why. And I think it's going to vary from one region of the world to another, from one country to another, from one leader to another, and that's why we decided to do this show, to sort of assess that, what the response will be, and who certain parts of the world or certain countries or certain leaders prefer to see elected by the end of today or by tomorrow, depending on how long this election will go in terms of reading its results.
Or maybe mid-December.
Hopefully it won't be that long.
Let's hope.
Yeah. So gentlemen, pick it up. Let's the phone lines are open, by the way. If you have a question or comment for Dr. Kia or Mike Bear, you want to join in the conversation, the phone lines are open at 721-1290, 1-800-568-5309. Or, of course, you can use the KGVO app, and we encourage you to do that. If you haven't downloaded that yet, please do so. There's a message us button right there, and that'll go directly to Nick and directly to our guests. So go ahead, please, Mike.
Yeah, well, as Mirdad said, I think internationally the election obviously will have enormous consequences, but it's not clear exactly what the preferences are. Europeans tend to like they tended to like Obama, they tended to like Clinton, not so much Bush, and definitely not so much Trump. And yet, when it comes down to it, they also much prefer American strength, even though they constantly complain about it, because American strength has enabled them, among other things, to keep their defense spending low, and which helps maintain prosperity in their various countries. And also, they're facing, granted at this point, somewhat weakened threat from Russia, but a very real one. And so the combination of all these things makes it very, very difficult. And the other thing is that a lot of times you hear European leaders complain publicly about overbearing American presidents, but from what I've read in various memoirs, histories, and so on, in private they sometimes have a very different opinion.
Yeah, now, and I think
go ahead,
I think in some ways at least we can start with Europe and say that not everyone, but the majority of European leaders, especially the stronger ones, UK, now led by a Labour Party sort of cabinet, France, Germany, at least these ones clearly prefer a continuation of the Biden administration, which is itself the continuation of the Obama administration. And they see a Harris presidency as a continuation of both Biden and Obama. And, of course, they have a more globalist approach toward foreign policy, which means that, though I agree with Mike that they want a strong America, but they do not want a strong America which more or less leads, but a strong America that follows their preferences.
Right.
And this is very important in terms of the globalist point of view. And I think somebody like Tony Blinken, our Secretary of State, is really for them the personification of this globalist view. That is, you consult first and you make sure that everyone is happy with the American decision, and you actually give the lead to European countries, sometimes in terms of acting as the leaders and so on and so forth. And they are concerned and afraid of a more unpredictable. They see a possible return of the Trump presidency as unpredictable, as also more American in its view of things, priority with the American leadership. And at times they are afraid, of course, of policies that might alienate Europe or might force Europe to follow United States rather than be an equal partner.
Right now, I just received a note from our friend of the show, Susan Campbell-Renaud. She's an observer at the election office. She said, quote, "You should see the line at the election office on Russell. So cool," end quote. So there you go.
That's
good to know.
That's wonderful.
That's
bet. Wonderful
Let's get another call in before we need to take a break. Helena has been waiting the longest. Helena, thank you for holding. You're on Talkback. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you. I was wondering if your guests could talk a little bit about what they thought the implications on the American side would be were Harris to be elected or were Trump to be elected for foreign policy. I talked a little bit about that, but I'm curious about the approach to both Ukraine and, unless this is too much to address at the moment, the approach to Gaza and Israel, to just see those two very hot spots, and also the implications for China and Iran. What's going to change? What's going to stay the same? And what implications does that bring? Thank you.
All right. Very good questions, and they require more than just the 1 minute we have before we take a break. So let's do that right now. Very important questions. Also, Mr. Wingnut is on the line, and we have plenty of phone lines open for you. This is an opportunity for you to weigh in with Doctors Mirdad Kia and Michael Mayer. A special, if you will, a domestic edition of Global Hotspots. We'll be right back after this quick timeout.
Suck it up.
It's not a big deal.
Snap out.
Just get over it.
We've all heard it. But if you're experiencing extreme stress, it's not just in your head. It can affect your entire body because toxic stress can hurt us physically without us even knowing it. If you've lost a job, worry about your next meal, or have trouble making it through the day, if you're feeling the effects of stress, we can help. Text stress to 211-211 to find a solution.
Okay, we are back on Talkback and Global Hotspots domestic style. Joining us on the phone right now, Dr. Mirdad Kia, Dr. Michael Mayer joining us here in the studio. What happens in America affects the whole world. So, gentlemen, she had some very good questions.
Yes, she did.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yes, she did, and she hit on a couple of the most important issues for foreign policy, and I think in a lot of ways you would see a continuity between the Biden administration, the Harris administration, and maybe more between the Obama administration and the Harris administration, and the people close to her in terms of foreign policy were close to Obama as well. Although also in the case of Sullivan, for example, to Biden. But I think Philip Gordon will be a major player. What's his name? Bitar. What's his first name, Mehrdad?
Which one? I'm sorry.
Bitar, the foreign policy guy in the Biden administration. I think though it was very close to Harris, and I think so. In general, I think you'd see that. I think she's probably less sympathetic to Israel than Biden is. I think she's it's very hard to know exactly where she is on Ukraine, as many issues. I think with respect to China, once again, it's very hard to tell. But I think in general, you'd see a great deal of continuity. In Trump's case, it's hard to know too, because as Mehrdad said, he's sometimes mercurial and or often mercurial, and on Ukraine. He says he'd negotiate a peace. I mean, it would be nice if he actually
on the first day
could. Yeah. I suspect that war is going to go on for a while either way. But the question of how much aid continues to go to Ukraine, he's raised the possibility that some of that aid should go be spent here in the United States.
Let me just backtrack a little bit. There are many that say that former President Obama has been the puppet master with Kamala Harris throughout this entire campaign, helping to orchestrate the switch from Biden to Harris, and has been behind the scenes, if you will. I don't know what manipulating is the right word, but counseling, urging, pointing the direction, that sort of thing. And he already had his 2 terms to be president. I mean, it's time to back off and let somebody else have a try.
Well, maybe so. But I go back and forth on that. I wonder, because although he clearly was one of the people who told Joe it was time to ride off into the sunset, he also said that there should be an open process for choosing a successor, which was not just handing it to Harris. And so it's not entirely clear. I mean, he was important in furthering her career, but it's not all that clear just how close their relationship has been the last number of months.
Okay. Mehrdad, do you want to comment before we take another call?
I don't know if Mike was alluding to Maher Bitar.
Yeah, thank you.
The American government official who has worked for both Obama and Biden administration and seems to be a possible rising star in Harris's team. He was basically executive board of the schools, the Georgetown University's Student for Justice in Palestine, and clearly has very strong pro-Palestinian views. I think the big change will be on Israel and the Palestinians. I think that Kamala Harris's position is much less traditional, in the sense that Biden comes from a more traditional point of view, which didn't matter how much you might not like Benjamin Netanyahu, you still maintained your commitment to the security of the State of Israel. I think Kamala Harris comes from a more left-wing part of the party, which actually has a much greater sympathy for the Palestinian side, and in fact much more critical toward Prime Minister Netanyahu, and might have major repercussions as a result of this. She has been advocating an immediate ceasefire, whereas the Israeli government basically felt very uncomfortable entering ceasefire talks with Hamas, because they now have the upper hand, and they think Hamas and Hezbollah are on the defensive, and why stop now and give Hamas and Hezbollah the opportunity to reorganize and rearm themselves through their help from Iran. I think where I agree with Mike is a bit confusing is the policy toward Ukraine, because Biden's administration approach toward Ukraine was pretty hawkish. very anti-Russian, very much in line with the position of keeping Putin and the Russian army bleed in Ukraine by helping, supporting, financing, arming the Ukrainian government, the Zelensky government. I have not heard anything from Kamala Harris on that. The only thing we heard was that very basic sort of sentence that some people, in fact, made fun out of. Russia is the big power, Ukraine is the small power, Russia has attacked Ukraine, which didn't seem like she had a very in-depth understanding of the situation in Eastern Europe. So I think it will be left to her team, whoever that team will be, to decide. And I have to tell you, I think the biggest difference between a Trump administration and a Harris administration is I think the Trump administration will be very much dominated by Donald Trump. And I think with the Harris administration, it will be dominated by the teams in the background who are devising policy and giving speeches to the president to read them.
All right, let's try to get another call in here. We have the phone lines are filling up now. It's a very good. We appreciate all the participation here. Mr. Wingnut is next. Mr. Nutt, you're on. Go ahead, please.
Good morning. As part of my daily routine, I track what's going on in Ukraine on Telegram and on YouTube, some channels that I favor, both those platforms. And very recently, they've had an election in Georgia and in Moldova. And the amount of election irregularities and ballot stuffing and violence and voter intimidation that occurred in both those countries. Unfortunately, Georgia went what they call pro-Russian, but thankfully Moldova, they retain the current president, and she is as a pro-Western. But when we look at our country, and we know what happened in 2020, this morning I had the opportunity to listen to a podcast by a lady called Cheryl Atkinson, who's pretty renowned as a pretty fair journalist. And a couple of days ago, she put out a podcast entitled Cheating in the 2024 Election. And it is well worth listening to because it discusses some of the voting irregularities in our country and some of the things that have occurred over the past years. Very sobering take on our election system. And let's just call it irregularities that have taken place. And I really recommend folks listen to that, cheating in the 2024 election. But I don't want to leave it on a negative. It's on the positive side of this is if we become aware of the potential and the very real voter irregularities that are occurring, it gives us the opportunity to address those. So that's kind of the positive take on that.
Okay. Good deal. Thanks for the call. We'll have those comments from our guests, from our co-hosts when we return. Walt, Skip, Rick, and Dave are all waiting. Luckily, we have till 10 o'clock, so we're going to come right back after this.
Hey there, Diesel Daredevil.
We are back on Talkback. All right, some interesting comments just a few moments ago from Mr. Wingnut. Gentlemen, please, go ahead. Michael.
Well, he raised a couple of really important points. I mean, the elections are, often you see trends developing with elections, say, in Europe or Latin America. And in both cases, they've been mixed. Some elections have gone to the left, some elections have gone to the right. And in the case of Georgia, as Wingnut said, a much more pro-Russian government than the last one. Maya Sandu's government in Moldova is decidedly pro-Western and is reelected. So you see things kind of going in different directions. It's hard to pick out trends in terms of corruption. Certainly, there's been corruption in American elections. The people who deny that have to be drinking some sort of funny liquid. But the fact is that in most cases, it's not enough to affect outcomes when elections get to be really close. It can. It certainly was a case in 1960. People who say, there's never been corruption in America, like, have you heard of Tammany Hall, the Daly machine, the Pendergast machine, and the Daly machine in Chicago, the Pendergast machine in Kansas City, and on and on and on. So Curley in Boston. It's been a feature of American politics, although I think it's fair to say less so at the national level, partly because it's diluted. It's easier to control a machine, even in a very large city like Chicago, than it is in a large country.
Mirdad, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't want to derail from very important day today in the United States, but Wingnut's questions are excellent, and I think it actually points out to something a bit deeper that we might not see at the first glance. Here is Georgia, this small republic in the southern Caucasus region. Caucasus, the area between the Caspian Sea to the east and the Black Sea to the west, next to Armenia and Azerbaijan. I've had the honor of actually giving talks in Georgia and have traveled there several times. A beautiful country with very kind and beautiful people. But here was a country which was actually applying to join the NATO and the European Union. It was very pro-West. Saakashvili, the president, the very pro-Western president, with some years at Columbia University, was considered to be the closest friend of the United States. When President George W. Bush went to Tbilisi, the capital of Georgia, I never forget, there were tens of thousands of people who came to welcome him. And of course, we then decided to disconnect because it was too far. Of course, American pragmatism. Does it have oil? No. Does it have gas? No. Does it have major investment opportunities for U.S. corporations? No. So why are we there in the first place anyway? It is the back door of Russia. And of course, with that approach, we basically left it. At one point when I was there, we were training Georgian special forces. Our special forces from Fort Bragg were actually training Georgian special forces. We basically left Georgia behind. Georgia has now fallen into the orbit of Russia and this Georgian Dream Party, which is basically run by an oligarch, very influential and rich oligarch with connection to Putin, has now taken over. And of course, in the name of safeguarding peace and a pragmatic policy and reminding the Georgians that we do not want what is happening in Ukraine, that is a Russian invasion, happening in Georgia, and of course, very extremist points of view. For example, attacking the LGBT community and saying that LGBT community is undermining the Georgian Orthodox Church, and so on and so forth. All of this has allowed more or less Putin to have the upper hand. The exact opposite is in Eastern Europe, Moldova. We have not abandoned Moldova and Eastern Europe. Why? They are next to Ukraine, and we are worried about their security. And the result is that the pro-U.S. candidate wins. So it matters what U.S. policy is, even in small countries that we have rarely heard about.
We have exactly 1 minute remaining in our time this hour, and then we have another hour yet to come on Talkback this morning. Global hotspots, focusing on politics nationally and internationally and how it's going to affect us. This being Election Day. So, by the way, the polls are open until 8 o'clock tonight. So, if you and by the way, as we mentioned at the outset of the show, if you have not registered to vote, it's not too late. You can register today. Just make sure you have all the proper identification, and you can register and vote on Election Day. That's one thing that we have here in Missoula. in case you may have just moved here or didn't have a chance to register to vote, you can do that today. But I would encourage you to get her done because the polls will close at 8 o'clock tonight. And then after that, of course, it'll be too late. By the way, we have Walt, Skip, Rick, and Dave all waiting to visit with you, gentlemen, when we come back after the top of the hour. And we appreciate both Drs. Kia and Meyer being with us. We'll be right back after this.
This is Talkback, 721-1290 or 1-800-568-5309.
This is Newstalk KGVO, AM 1290 and 98.3 FM. KGVO, Missoula's news and weather station.
Welcome back, everyone. Hour number 2 of Talkback on this Tuesday, November 5th, Election Day. We will continue here in just a moment, but our sponsors include 123 Seamless Gutters, family owned and operated. Let them handle everything to do with gutters so you don't have to. Their number, 406-240-2669, protecting the foundation of your future. By Harrington Surgical Supply. Appointments are preferred for mastectomy fittings and custom compressions, but walk-ins always welcome. Also brought to you by Y West Storage out at the Y on Two Smokes Way. If you need someplace to store your stuff, you bet. Give them a call, 406-510-0590. They're making room for you. And by Phillips Janitorial, where no job is too big or small. Whether it's your home or your business, you give them a call. Your satisfaction guaranteed. 406-260-6617.
The views and opinions expressed on Talkback are not those of the staff, management, or advertisers.
Welcome back. Good to have you along. A special, if you will, domestic edition of Global Hotspots. Dr. Michael Mayer joining us here in the studio, University of Montana Professor Emeritus, and joining us on the phone, Dr. Mirdad Kia, Professor of History at the University of Montana. And the phone lines are jammed. So let's jump right in and get Skip on the line. He's been waiting the longest. Skip, good morning. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Peter. I thought Walt was going to be ahead of me. However, thank you both for coming on. A very appropriate day so we can be thinking about what's really going to happen in this election is going to have so much effect on the rest of the world. I believe that two places that maybe you can help us with some insight are going to be the future actions of someone like Kim Jong-il, depending on who becomes the president, as having to do with his how he would feel about Kamala versus Donald Trump, and then and his future actions, especially with nuclear devices, I would think, and then and then what will happen with China's attitude having to do with Taiwan and the South China Sea as to how they proceed forward. If Donald Trump takes the helm versus someone like Kamala Harris. In case you could pull the covers back a little on those, because that affects trade routes and things like that from the China standpoint. And if someone just paid attention to Kim Jong-il and like patted him on the head and said, "We know you're here," like Donald Trump might do, I was wondering if you thought anything about those two items. And thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you for the call, sir. Gentlemen, please go ahead.
Well, thanks for the question. That was it's a very good one, and it's a hard, like all of these, it's a hard one to answer. We're talking about possibilities, not something that's already happened. But it is clear that North Korea periodically stages temper tantrums if not enough attention's being paid. But it is a nuclear power, and they have a large army, and they have sent troops to Russia, apparently to engage in support the Russian effort in Ukraine, and so that's a very serious development, and certainly the Europeans are very worried about it, and rightly, and so are South Koreans, and it's hard to know. Obviously, they've done this under Biden's watch. Whether Harris would take a different stand, a tougher stand, it seems unlikely, but she might. Again, we don't know much about that. And the same thing is true with Taiwan. In the case of Trump, again, he talks about pulling back, and he talks about not spending more at home and all the rest of this, but he also talks about building up the military. And to be fair to Trump, Trump's is the one presidency this century where Putin hasn't invaded somebody, and it's hard to know whether his approach to China would be effective or not. We may see.
Yeah, so we woke up. I don't know how many of our listeners are aware, but just a little bit, earlier today, North Korea actually launched 7 short-range ballistic missiles into the area of what I would call the sea east of the Korean Peninsula. And 7 missiles were detected by Japan, of course, and South Korea. They flew about 400 kilometers, which is roughly 248 miles, I think. And this is causing a lot of nervousness and anxiety both in Japan and South Korea. Basically, it is determined to expand its nuclear arsenal, and it has become much closer to Russia, as Mike correctly pointed out. It has sent a large number of troops to help Russia in Ukraine, and of course, in return, Russia has increased its economic and agricultural cooperation, which simply means feeding the starving North Korean people in a way that they can still sustain at least a basic life. That's a very alarming situation. I think with regard to Taiwan, China's plans to basically dominate the region, East Asia, and retake Taiwan for itself is very real. And I don't know how much these administrations, whether it's going to be a Democrat or Republican, have even thought about it. We were told in the beginning of the Biden administration that we are leaving Middle East and putting all our focus on China and Taiwan. Very interesting. We stayed in the Middle East. We became more engaged in the Middle East. There is a war, several wars in the Middle East, and we haven't heard much about Biden administration's position now with regard to Taiwan and China. So I think it's one thing what they say, another to see how they respond. We have become basically, especially in the last 4 or 5 years, a country which is responding rather than initiating. We are responding to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Hamas's attack on Israel, and I hope that we have a more proactive initiative with regard to China, because it poses a major threat to U.S. interests and the allies of the United States in Asia.
And with that, we're going to come right back after a quick break. We have Rick, Dave, and Joe all waiting to visit with you, gentlemen, on this special edition of Global Hotspots with Doctors Michael Mayer and Mirdad Kia. Back right after this quick timeout.
Call 123-SEAMLESS.
Dennis Bragg with your latest weather. A 50% chance of snow through Tuesday morning, and then mostly cloudy and cold with a high near 38 degrees. Gusty winds as high as 30 miles per hour at times. Not expecting much snow in the valleys, perhaps half an inch early on, but then several inches of snow at elevations above 4,000 feet. So that means some winter driving over the passes and in the higher valleys. Our coldest night yet Tuesday, with lows in the low to mid-teens by Wednesday morning. That means some patchy fog, but then sunshine returns Wednesday and Thursday.
Welcome back to Talkback, everybody. Peter Christian here, Nick Christensen taking your phone calls, producing Talkback. Joining us in the studio, Dr. Michael Mayer on the phone, Dr. Mirdad Kia, and waiting on the phone right now is Rick. Rick, good morning. You are on Talkback, sir. What's on your mind?
Good morning, gentlemen. I'm a staunch supporter of Israel, and I am wondering how the Harris administration, if she becomes president, would treat Israel. She only seems to be interested in gender politics and things like that. And I don't think our politicians nowadays understand the plight of Israel between the Second World War and the time that it was given a state. They don't know anything about the Haagen-Dazs. They don't know anything about the Exodus ships. They don't know anything about the gun factories that were secretly being making arms to fight against the the Arabs and the British. And I would like you guys to address briefly about that history from the Second World War to the time that it was given a state. And I don't believe the Jewish people are ever going to be displaced again. They're always going to have a homeland, and they'll fight until every last man, woman, and child to keep that homeland. And I think our politicians have no clue the tenacity of the Israeli people. And I'd like you to comment that, and could you keep me online so I could hear it?
Okay, that's fine. Go ahead, gentlemen, your thoughts. Mirdad.
I think it is a very long and painful history to review. And I think in sharp contrast to what has been said, that this is something which started late 19th century and continued after First World War in 1920s and 30s with Jewish Europeans fleeing persecution in Europe. That's part of this history. I think the connection between the Jewish people and the Holy Lands, Jerusalem and the surrounding area, is ancient. It goes back to the ancient history, and there were Jewish kingdoms, and we hear about some of the figures who led these kingdoms, from Solomon and to other kings, to David, and so on and so forth. But in fact, the long history and connection between the Jewish people and the region we call Middle East, and especially the Holy Land, is very rich, very long, and cannot be dismissed. Yes, it is true that the Jewish national movement, the Zionist movement, built on that in the 19th century and proposed to create a safe haven for the Jews who were persecuted in Europe, especially in Eastern Europe. 80% of the total Jewish population in the world lived in Russia, and the part of Poland which was under Russian rule at the time. And they were being attacked systematically in what we call the pogroms. And the reason why they were looking for a safe haven for a country of their own back in ancient Holy Land was because they were under systematic attacks, which culminated, by the way, in the Holocaust, where you have over 6 million Jews being destroyed systematically, not only by Hitler and the Nazi Party, but by a lot of their allies and countries which were allied with Germany. So this history has convinced the Jewish people, the ones at least I talked to in Israel when I was there, that this is not something that is just for today and tomorrow. This is the only safe haven the Jews can call home, and they will defend it at any cost, if it is even to the point of going to wars. And I think now, for the first time in the last few decades, the neighboring Arab countries have recognized the need for understanding that Israel will be part of the region, and they have to negotiate a peace treaty with it. Unfortunately, that is not a consensus in the Arab world. It's just among certain Arab leaderships or certain Arab governments. Look at Hamas, look at Hezbollah. These are Arab organizations, and unfortunately and tragically, they still are determined to destroy the Jewish state.
Michael.
Yeah, the only thing that I would add to Meredith's really nice summary of that is that most of the people who are referred to today as Palestinians aren't sort of indigenous inhabitants of the area either. Most of them migrated from Syria in the 19th century as well. These things, as Meredith pointed out, are extremely complicated. and this attempt to sort of turn it into a cartoon, black and white issue, it really obliterated. But Rick's question about what would Harris do, the only way I think you can predict, because she hasn't been very explicit about this except to express sympathy for Gaza, and then after she got the nomination for the survival of Israel, Israel's right to defend itself, is to look at the people around her. And Sullivan is likely to play a major role in a Harris administration. Gordon is likely to play a major role in the Harris administration. Bitar is likely to play a major role. Samantha Power is likely to play a large role. And most of those people are not sympathetic, particularly to Israel, certainly not even compared to the Biden administration, although Sullivan is very much a major part.
Okay, with that, we're up against a break, and just received this note, and want to pass it along because it does focus on what's going on with the election today. Sandra Basica reminds me that late voter registration ends at noon today. So if you want to register to vote, if you haven't registered to vote yet, you have to do it by noon today. All right? Just so you know. We'll be right back. We have calls from Dave, Joe, Ben, and Steve. And, of course, our hosts, Dr. Michael Mayer and Dr. Mirdad Kia, back when we return after this.
Montana State News Network.
I'm Dennis Bragg. If Republican Tim Sheehy hopes to claim victory in today's race for the U.S. Senate, he'll need to do something other GOP hopefuls haven't done: shut down incumbent John Tester in several key counties. In both 2012 and 2018, Tester was able to beat his conservative rivals by losing a majority of Montana's 56 counties, but using pockets of support to come out the winner. In 2012, Tester beat Denny Rehberg 49 to 45%, even though the Republican won in 41 counties, some by 60 to 70%. Tester won by capturing a handful of smaller counties, but really pulled away in Cascade, Deer Lodge, Gallatin, Glacier, Hill, Lake, Lewis and Clark, and Silverbow counties, and obviously Missoula. In 2018, Tester downed Matt Rosendale by fewer than 20,000 votes. That margin of victory once more came from Great Falls, Bozeman, Glacier, Lake, and Deer Lodge counties, Helena, Missoula, Butte, and Park counties, as well as a few of the smaller counties. A point to watch with tonight's results is whether any of those counties shift for Tester or for Sheehy. While there's been a lot of debate the past 4 years over the integrity of vote by mail, it's once more the overwhelming favorite of Montana voters. The Secretary of State's office says over 77% of the 545,000 absentee ballots requested have now been returned. That's over 423,000, roughly double the number of registered voters that could be cast at polling places today. 241,000 voters is the maximum number remaining to vote today. Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks stepping up testing efforts to track chronic wasting disease in northwest Montana. FWP is using new mandatory testing requirements for all tags now that are filled near Libby, recommending that hunters receive a negative CWD test before taking any deer, elk, or moose meat to a processor or donating to a local food bank. This is the Montana State News Network.
For more on these stories and others around Montana, download the Montana State News app or visit montanastatenews.com.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma.
At age 30, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, you can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
If I could be you.
And you could be me for just 1 hour.
If you could find a way
to get inside each other's mind.
Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
We've all felt left out. And for some, that feeling lasts more than a moment. We can change that. Learn how at belongingbeginswithus.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Welcome back, everybody. We are back on Global Hotspots, domestic version, with Drs. Mirdad Kia and Michael Mayer joining us on the phone. Dr. Kia is on the phone, Dr. Mayer here in the studio. Let's jump right back into the phones and get Dave, who's been waiting the longest. Thank you for your patience, sir. Go ahead, please.
Sure. I'd like to, Putin only respects strength, along with the other dictators like in China North Korea and Iran, they only respect strength, and they won't back down unless they're forced to. And if I remember back when Neville Chamberlain met with Hitler, another person like that, and Neville Chamberlain let Czechoslovakia go to Hitler, and it didn't stop the war. It just made the next war worse. And if our next president allows Putin to take Ukraine, it's just the beginning of a bigger war. And I'm hoping that, I wish Nikki Haley was in the possibility of being there, because she would stand up to Putin, but I doubt very much that either one or the other two will.
All right, Dave, thanks for the call. Gentlemen, your response.
I actually tend to agree with Dave on this. First of all, I'm an avid supporter of Ukraine, and I think I've expressed this many times, in the past, in our previous programs. I do not believe that Vladimir Putin should be allowed to take an inch of Ukrainian territory, because that would send the wrong message in the wrong direction. I do not know what their policies will be. There is no indication. I assume that Harris's policy will be a continuation of Biden's approach that is keeping Europe and United States united in one approach. And Trump has claimed that he can negotiate a peace treaty with Putin. I don't know how that is possible at this point. What I do know is that the view in Moscow is that Trump is more unpredictable and therefore more frightening as a president, whereas Harris is more predictable and therefore it will be the continuation of the previous policy. What I do agree with Dave, though, is Putin reminds me of a very nationalistic and fascistic leader, and any attitude which is too compromising and too conciliatory will be construed in Moscow as a sign of weakness. Here, strength in foreign policy is absolutely essential. And let us remember that China is watching, because if Putin can get away with it, China will then conclude that it can get away with an invasion of Taiwan.
Michael.
And Putin has already gotten away with it. I mean, he invaded Crimea and nothing happened. He actually invaded Georgia before that, and not much happened. And I think that's led to his more aggressive posture. And also, I think, as Meredith's pointed out on a number of occasions, the botched withdrawal in Afghanistan also gave him kind of if not an incentive, at least
it emboldened him.
Yeah, it emboldened him, right. And so I think that's the thing to keep in mind.
Joe is up next. Joe, thank you for holding. You're on Talkback. Go ahead, please.
Good morning. Yeah, a lot has been said about Trump, the uncertainty of what he's going to be, but he has already been president for 4 years. And, Obama, when Crimea was invaded, sent blankets, but Trump sent tomahawks, and he pressured the Europeans to pay their 2% very successfully. And so I would say that he is dealing through strength, and he has a good record on that. And the other thing I wanted to mention was in Georgia, several months ago, there was protests in Tbilisi, I believe, the capital there.
That's right.
So they were very upset about a bill to a foreign agent act, which would require registration, which the United States has. And we're very used to it, but I think I understand why now that you explained that the election produced a Russian-backed government. The NGOs are afraid to have their identity revealed because the Russians would take advantage of that. Anyway.
All right. Thanks for the call, gentlemen. Your response to that.
Thank you.
Mike, go ahead.
You know, I think Joe's point about Trump at times certainly had a rocky relationship with some of the NATO leaders, but he did get them to pony up a lot more for defense, and that is one of the things that has contributed to the defense of Ukraine, especially some of France and Germany, having more to be able to send. And I think that's and especially some of the Scandinavian countries. I think it's been an important part. And still, I mean, he says things, but Joe's point about we can look back at what he did is a good one.
I think if I can just add 2 sentences to this, I think ironically, those who want the end of the conflict in the Middle East, given Trump's close friendship with Netanyahu in Israel, and given the fact that Netanyahu feels much more comfortable with a Trump administration, if the Trump administration decides to sort of give maybe a bit of a green light for Israel to finish its operations, but at the same time ask Netanyahu for cessation of hostilities and somehow work with Arab governments, because something has to happen in Gaza. I mean, that piece of real estate needs to be rebuilt, and the whole issue of Palestinians in Gaza should be resolved. I think if you want, sort of a pragmatic approach, Netanyahu would listen to Trump much more than to a Harris administration.
We're going to come right back, and we have Ben, Steve, Catherine, and Larry all waiting to visit with you, gentlemen. Special edition of Global Hotspots going on right now, and if you want to get in the queue, we'd love to hear from you. It's 721-1290. We'll be back right after this. We're back on Talkback. 721-1290 is our number, 1-800-568-5309. And let's get right back to the phones for our guest, Ben. Thank you for holding. You're on. Go ahead, please, sir.
Hi. Yes. I was watching a talk with John Mersheimer, a geopolitical strategist, and he was saying that in his regard, the biggest mistake of the Ukraine war on part of the United States was not litigating a swift end to the war and thereby pushing Russia into the sphere of China and Iran. If we assume that Harris would be, instantiate a continuation of the current policy, what would you think would occur if that were to be the case? And also, if Trump is to become president, we've mentioned that is a sort of style of peace through strength, but also, on the other hand, his isolationist policy sort of presents problems. One could say less presence in the world, and could encourage other countries to seek the influence and aid of Russia and China. We saw that Russia was conducting war games with Indonesia last week, and of course you guys mentioned that North Korea is deploying troops in Ukraine. I guess what would you guys how would you guys respond to those considerations?
All over the world there. Gentlemen, please go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. That raised some really interesting points, particularly the point about litigating a quick end, which certainly would have been desirable, except for, I think it's hard. You need two parties willing to reach an agreement in order to do that. And Putin was very determined to take the eastern provinces, and Ukraine was very determined not to surrender them to Russia. And so at that point, it's really, until one of them gets their nose bloodied pretty substantially, it's very hard to do. And, especially in the early phases when both sides are reasonably optimistic. And if you recall, in the earliest phases, Russia advanced pretty aggressively. Then Ukraine stiffened up defenses and made counter gains.
With help.
Yeah, with a lot of help, to be sure, but they did. I mean, let's face it, the Ukrainians have done the fighting,
right.
And but because of that, I think it's easier to talk about negotiating some sort of settlement than it is actually to reach one.
Mirda.
Yeah, so I think in these are excellent points that Ben brought up. I don't think that the West, and especially the United States, should be blamed for pushing Putin into the arms of the Chinese. In some ways, Putin himself, through his own policies, realigned and basically moved toward a closer alliance with China, which I believe personally is suicidal for Russia. And if I were speaking as a Russian nationalist, I would say that a lukewarm relationship with the West, with Europe, is a much better approach for Russia because of the economic opportunities, investment opportunities for the Russian economy than allying yourself with China. I think the biggest mistake with regard to Ukraine was made when he started chipping on Ukrainian territory, eastern provinces, and then, of course, Crimea, which has nothing in other than the imperial glory for Russia, basically, and access to Black Sea, of course, but he risked it. And, of course, we did not respond properly. During the Obama administration, the underlying philosophy was basically this is not our sphere of influence. This is the back door of Russia. Let him take something as long as his appetite is satisfied and he doesn't encroach further, we'll be fine. And, of course, his appetite was actually, increased or expanded because nobody did anything. I think when an expansionist, aggressive nationalist expansionist like Putin takes this kind of approach, the response should be far more formidable force and far more formidable opposition and isolation of Russia. We are doing it now, but it came at the cost of Ukraine losing large swaths of its territory.
We're going to come right back. 721-1290 is our number. By the way, I did hear from the Election Center that you can register to vote all the way up until 8 o'clock tonight. The cutoff is not at noon. I was mistaken in that, and we appreciate that correction. So if you haven't yet registered to vote, you can do it all the way up until the time the polls close at 8 o'clock tonight. So be aware of that. We'll be right back after this.
As you gather with...
Welcome back to Talk Back, and we are continuing here, and the phone lines are still mostly full, so let's get as many calls in as we can. Steve, thank you so much for your patience in holding. You're on with our guest. Go ahead, please.
Thanks, Peter. Hey, guys. Actually surprised to hear you back on the air, given the conversation around DEI and some of the views that you shared 2 weeks ago or whatever. I fear that... the culture in the United States is going to change radically under Kamala Harris. She is a classic example of diversity, equity, and inclusion, non-elected, but nominated by a set of cultural elites that are unfortunately going to determine the outcome of our civilization for a very long time, I believe. I believe she will win. And I'm very, very sad, not by her in particular. I don't think she'll do much. She's shown that she's very incompetent overall. But where I am very, very afraid for my children and other people with children and for their futures is the people that she appoints to governmental positions and they hire to support them. We already know that the Supreme Court, a number of justices have sided with these crazy DEI opinions that were appointed by the Biden administration and others with Democratic administrations, not based on merit. We've seen the immigration impacts in some of our larger cities where crime, violence, gang activity, drug activity has increased substantially. It's clear that these immigrants are going to being placed in places where the Democrats hope to make them naturalized U.S. citizens that can vote and hopefully garner their vote by that accommodation of letting them into the country and forever rule. So I know those probably sound like wild, wacky conspiracy theories, but we've seen other wild, wacky conspiracy theories come to truth, like COVID, where still no one has been held accountable, yet millions of people, more people than died in the Holocaust or even in World War II died, and yet not a single person has been held accountable for that disease that was created in a lab using U.S. tax dollars, now widely accepted. And so I think today is a sad day for our country. I appreciate all the talk about other places, but this is a great place. It's a place that obviously people still want to come and fulfill their lifelong ambitions and dreams. But unfortunately, I think the system will be forever changed after January, effectively. But with today's vote, and I'm really sad to see that. I cannot understand why the Republicans are so hell-bent on this abortion issue. It's clear that most Americans don't give a hoot about abortion, yet they compel themselves to side on that side of an argument. It's a losing argument and one that will cost us our greater value system. And so any comments that y'all have around, those more domestic related matters to cheer me up perhaps and maybe help me not be so sad for my kids would be greatly appreciated.
Thanks for the call, gentlemen. A hug would do.
Yeah.
but no, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I think some of the concerns that he raised are well founded, but it's hard to predict. Kamala Harris constantly, Trump will be a dictator. He will do this. He will, in spite of the fact that, for example, he said he's against a national legislation on abortion. She says he will do this, and doing the other way also is a problem with Harris, because even if she intends certain policies, it looks like there's a reasonable probability the Senate will go against her. And so it'll be difficult to do a lot of things that she intends to do. Now, obviously, the presidency is very powerful, and you can do certain things through executive orders. But there are constraints, and so maybe that'll cheer Steve up a little bit.
Beardad.
Yeah, I think that what Mike just said actually hitting the nail on the head. I do think that we are entering into a very sort of unique situation in our society. I try to learn something from each election. First and foremost, what I did learn, of course, is that objective journalism has died in the United States in some ways. And it's amazing to watch that, you just turn on any channel and it's either this way or that way, basically. And for the most part, of course, it has been tilting in one direction. It has been mostly pro-Harris. I could care less whether people come and give comments for or against vice president or former president. But I expect, as a citizen of this country, to be also informed and in a more objective and detached fashion. And I have completely sort of lost my confidence in the popular media providing any objective information on any front. So what really worries me, and this is so-called educated class, the intellectual class basically has politicized the situation, that it has become a shouting match, more or less. I am with this party, with this political line, and if you basically oppose me or criticize me, you're a fascist, you're a Nazi, you're this or that. This kind of labeling and this kind of dehumanizing the other side is quite dangerous for a democracy, especially when it starts at the level of media and the educated class.
I will just add one quick note before we get to Catherine's call. I honestly believe that our Constitution has pretty broad shoulders. And the fact that we're in the middle of one election. This is one election cycle. It's not going to make or break our country. Our country is a great country. We have a Constitution that has been tried and true, and when we need to change it, we have the opportunity to change it. So I do not live in that world. Okay,
I agree with that in general. We made the same point, except for a couple of things. One is that one election certainly did change things, 1860. Yeah. And that produced, now that had been building for a generation, right, to be sure, but it did produce that. The thing that distresses me the most about this election is the open attack on the U.S. Constitution, the First Amendment, and other things, and even institutions that aren't constitutional, whether it's the Senate, the Electoral College, even the filibuster, which is simply Rule 22 of the Senate, but has been in place for a very, very long time. It's been changed a number of times in the last 50 years, but it's still largely in place. And I think those open attacks, I mean, when we saw Hillary Clinton and John Kerry attacking the First Amendment a couple of weeks ago openly, I mean, that shocked me.
It should be done away with.
That shocked me because even 10 years ago, I cannot imagine any major political figure in any party openly saying the First Amendment's a problem. We really need to do something about it.
Because there's too much disinformation out there.
Well,
right?
there was a lot of disinformation at the time of the Constitution, and people, you could say the same thing. Well, the printing press makes it much more, it makes it easier to get stuff out and get to people, and you can lie, and they did. But that's exactly why we have the First Amendment.
We're going to come right back, and we'll have a 1 minute timeout. We'll get Catherine, Larry, and Ed, and try to get. They've been very patiently waiting. We're going to get their calls right after this 1 minute timeout. On Talkback, 721-1290 is our number. We have about 8 minutes left to get as many calls in as we can. And Catherine, I want to say thank you for your patience. Please go ahead.
Morning. So Gordon Peterson in his last podcast talked about Trump and his what he called his X-Men team. And he has told RFK that he's giving him carte blanche over the health agencies to reform and change them in a bid to reduce chronic diseases. And RFK is also an anti-vaxxer, by the way. He has also discussed giving Elon Musk the job of reducing government bureaucracy and manning a government efficiency commission, and Tulsi Gabbard a possible say in the defense and VA sections of government. What do you think of those people as a possibility for Trump's cabinet, and how do you think that would work out?
All right. Excellent question. Go ahead, gentlemen, please. Mike.
Yeah, those are very good questions and legitimate concerns, obviously.
Now, wouldn't they have to be confirmed by the Senate?
Yeah, they would have to be confirmed by the Senate. Yeah. And again, their ability to maintain Trump's ear and so on is, I mean, you look at the people who came in with the Trump administration last time, most of them didn't last a year and a half. There was a great deal of turnover. I'm sure somebody on the other side will point out turnover in the vice president's offices. But Trump is, again, is mercurial, and it's hard to know. But even turning over a certain amount of policy to RFK Jr. doesn't mean that the possibility to influence health policy could do damage. It doesn't mean that necessarily he's able to do that. Again, I guess we'll just have to see.
Mirdad.
Yeah, among the individuals that Catherine mentioned, I personally like Tulsi Gabbard. I think she's smart. She's very well-read. She knows the world. She has served this country at different levels. I don't know exactly her exact political stance with regard to different issues, but I do think that as a person who has seen both parties too now, former Democrat and now Republican, I think she's a very thoughtful and intelligent thinker. And we need more of these folks on both sides, less ideologues and more sort of thoughtful, educated individuals. Sometimes I feel that the more you shout and the louder you shout, you get closer to the center of power because you are proving your loyalty, whereas I think Tulsi Gabbard is a different person. I also think that given the fact that the rate of expulsions from their positions was so high under Trump, I would not hold my breath. That is, people who might get a job in the beginning if he is elected might not last very long in their positions. So we have to see what happens.
All right, let's get Larry on the line. He's been waiting the longest. Larry, thank you for your patience, sir. You go ahead, please.
Good morning. I submitted a app question, but I know you have to take the callers first. If Trump's elected, I'm sure he would want to re-energize the Abraham Accords. And do you think enough countries in the Middle East would want to join that effort? And I'll hang up. Thanks, Larry. That's a short but very good question.
A very good question. Again, it's hard to say say something will happen in the future with any degree of certainty, but I suspect that would be a priority or at least something on the agenda for the Trump administration if it were to come to pass.
Try to shore those up.
Yeah, he's certainly very proud of that. The real thing would be to add Saudi Arabia and then additional countries to the list, and I'm sure they'll make an effort to do so, but for all their fumbling of that issue, the Biden administration also made that a priority but wasn't able to achieve it. And as Mehrdad's pointed out repeatedly, the October 7th invasion of Israel was in large part an attempt to derail that process. And in that regard, if in no other one, it's been successful.
Yeah, I think that in case of a Trump victory, there will be a return to the Abraham Accord. It was actually working for many months until the October 7th attack by Hamas against Israel. I do think that's one piece of the solution here. And I do believe that if simultaneously the U.S. administration starts looking at the end of the tunnel, what should happen beyond Hamas and beyond Hezbollah, and resolve the issue with Iran. I don't think any of these issues can be resolved unless we have a change of regime in Tehran, or at least we have a situation that the Iranian regime is more or less neutralized the way it was for at least a year after Qasem Soleimani was killed outside the airport in Baghdad, Iraq. You have to have an Iran which is not intervening and undermining the peace process, and you have to have assurances to the Arab countries that this will be a long and continuing peace process and it's not going to be disrupted easily.
Gentlemen, we have exactly a minute and a half left. And Ed, I apologize. We couldn't get your call in, but we appreciate your calling. Gentlemen, a minute each, real quickly. Michael.
Real quickly, on the 18th, we'll be talking about, on the book club, we'll be talking about Dwight Chapin's book, Chapin, The President's Man. He was one of Nixon's advisors, one of his long-term aides, and it promised to be an interesting discussion.
Okay, Mehrdad, how about a minute or so on Election Day? Go ahead, please.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to be on this show during such an important day. All I can say is, you read a report that the lines are very long. That makes me very happy. It doesn't matter which side of the divide you fall. It is very important that we all participate in this democratic elections, and I hope that more people educate themselves about their own civil rights and their right to participate in their own governmental affairs, and that's why we have these shows and these debates and discussions.
Gentlemen, thank you both for being with us. We appreciate your expertise and your commentary. All right, thanks, Mirdad. Thank you, Michael. And thank you to all of you. By the way, you guys, the last several days, have been absolutely hitting it out of the park with all of your calls into Talkback. That's what Talkback's all about, is hearing what you guys think, is hearing what you guys want to put forward, and we appreciate each and every one of you. So, Nick, what's coming up on tomorrow's show, sir?
We're going to do open phones tomorrow to talk about election results. Walt was kind enough to move his normal Wednesday slot to next Wednesday.
Okay. Have a great day, everybody. Get out and vote.